All right, guys, today I want to show you how to wire a single pole switch. But before I do, I want to tell you that I am not an electrician. So don't go out and try this on your own unless you are a licensed electrician and know what you're doing. So that being said, this is just for informational purposes, just so you can kind of look over the guy's shoulder and kind of know what he's doing. So let's get started. All right, so here we go. So a couple of things you guys might notice right away is this is a switch, and I have this yellow Romex ran to it, which means this is a size 12 wire, which also means that it's probably pulled off a 20 amp circuit. Yes, I know lighting circuits are normally 15 amp and normally on a size 14 wire. This is just a little wall section that we worked up, and we pulled the power from an outlet, from a regular 15 amp plug, but it's on a 20 amp circuit. So we're sticking with the size 12 wire. Never drop down. If you know you're dealing with the 20 amp circuit, stick with the size 12 wire. Okay, don't drop down just because you're going up and using it on lighting. You can always go bigger, but don't go smaller. Now, our box, you want to make sure that you have some wire anchored within 6 inches of the box. You want to make sure that your wire comes at least 6 inches out. So they make special strippers for this, but what I do is I'll just use a regular utility knife, and I very carefully score right down the middle. Okay, because that's where the ground is at, the copper. I'll peel it back into the box a ways. Make sure nothing's in the way. We'll go back here. Cut it off. Now, like I said, some of these wires have been used before, and people have wired up several switches here, so they're a little twisted up. But you want to inspect all the wires, make sure that you didn't nick anything, make sure all of them look good, make sure that everything's where it needs to be. Now, in this case, for a switch, a regular single pole switch, okay, so this one's been used before, it's a little beat up. You have 2 bronze or copper colored screws, okay, and you should have a ground somewhere. The green is ground. So the neutrals, which are the white wires, those will just get bonded together. And then just like you're in elementary school, all you're doing is breaking the circuit. So what this switch does, it either makes these 2 contact together or it disconnects them. So it connects the circuit, breaks the circuit, connects the circuit, breaks the circuit. So we're going to hook the 2 black wires up to both these screws. It doesn't matter which one goes where, but we do need to hook those up. The coppers are just the ground. They're going to get hooked together, and they're going to hook to the screw. So there's a ton of different types of connectors. If you're old school, you can use wire nuts or PTs, and we're probably going to use some PTs if I can find them here. All right, so and before we get too far, make sure that the circuit's off. Make sure there's no power whatsoever. This is not connected to anything at all, so I know there's no power. There's nothing connected to the other end of this wire. So you need to make 100% sure before you even take the cover off there's no power there. Plug something in, get some testers, whatever you got to do, make sure there's no power. And don't just flip the light switch off in the other room. You know, if you're working on a light, don't just shut the light switch off and go up and work on the light. Because if there's power being used somewhere else in that circuit, you could get nailed off the neutral. So shut it off the breaker, shut everything off. Again, this is why you should have a licensed electrician doing it. Don't do it yourself. Now, having said that, we'll start stripping some of these wires, get the lengths set. These 2 I'm going to cut back just a little bit. Now remember, the neutrals, you don't really need for anything in the switch. And this is about as simple as it'll get. Now PT, again, there's a ton of different ways to connect these together. Just a little copper cylinder. And we're going to slide it over the 2 neutrals and crimp it on there. When you're doing this, you want to make sure you don't crimp the insulation, and you want to make sure that the wire is all the way in there. Loose wires, loose connections cause sparks, and sparks cause fires. So make sure you get these things connected really well. Just cut the tips off a little bit. Again, there's no insulation in there. Tips are going through. I want to make sure that everything's tight. Okay. Make sure you use ample amount of electrical tape on there. I use the Scotch, the 33 Plus. It's good stuff. Go right off the end. You can fold it over. Okay. So just one last inspection, make sure everything looks good, and these neutrals can just be pushed back into the box. Okay, now let's work on the grounds. This one is already kind of bent up, so, and some inspectors, some people might want you to put pigtails on here, which is just, if you crimped all these together, or if you use some kind of another push connector or something, you just have an extra chunk of wire that goes in there, and that will be the one that comes out and gets hooked to your switch. For your rough-in inspections, occasionally they'll let you get by with just having your wires stick out 6 inches and have the staples on. A lot of inspectors now want you to go ahead and have all of the neutrals tied together and the grounds bonded together to pass your initial rough-in inspection. But you'll have to check your local area. Again, I'm not an electrician, so if there is an electrician listening to this, feel free, chime in below. And I always crimp these BTs twice. Alright, so this wire was a little short. It was here when we got started. So what I'm going to do, just for ease, this demonstration, we'll make them about the same size. Now, when you're going to put a wire on a switch, you need it a little bit longer because you got to be able to roll it over. That's what I use these holes for. I'll put my finger on the back side of the hole, push it through till it pokes, and then roll it over. Same thing here. Get this ready. Now, when you put these on there, you're going to want to make sure you don't go and wrap these in the wrong direction. By that I mean when you tighten this screw, it goes clockwise to tighten it. So we want to wrap the wire around from this side around to this side. So as we're tightening it, it'll suck it on more rather than try to push the wire off. So I'll show you what I mean here. So this is another area where you want to make sure you're not pinching the insulation under that screw head. You want a good contact. So that's about where I like to break it. I don't want a lot of copper back here because anything can touch it and it could short out, okay? So I like to break it there. If you have it up too far, it might not be a good connection. This one might even be a little long on the copper, but it'll work. And I use one thumb to kind of make sure the wire's pushed back tight under the screw. Make sure it's nice and tight around the screw. Snug it up. Okay. So both of those are nice and tight. Our switch is oriented properly. It says off and on. If it's upside down, it tells you no. Okay, that's upside down. Make sure you have it the right direction. It works the same each way. It's just a little annoying. People are used to going to a room and turning it on is up and off is down. So make sure your switch is facing the right direction. Now, focus on this ground. Okay, turn that around. Again, make sure that ground is turned the right direction. And if it's a little bit wide for the screw, you can go back. Make sure it's nice and snug around there. Okay, got our ground on there. I'm going to go ahead and push our ground back. All the way back. I try to push anything that could touch the screws on the side of this plug all the way back. Okay, you don't want to accidentally ground this thing out. Okay, we're good and clear. Nothing's touching. What I do is I just push with my hands, stagger this sideways a little bit, and I push it in all the way to make sure the wires will bend properly. Give it one last look. Make sure everything's nice and clear with that switch. Top screw started. bottom screw started. Try to bring them in evenly, a little bit of time. There we go. All right, there you go. Your switch should be wired and good to go. We'll continue on. Maybe we'll talk about how to wire a light next, and then we'll go over how to wire a plug. If you want to put your switch plate on, it's super easy, go for it. Again, these are pretty cheap, so don't over tighten them. They tend to crack, but just go on just like that, tighten it on. All right, good luck, stay safe.